My name is Ethan Carter. And the first time I saw my son's face, he was dying on an operating table. The strange part, I didn't know he was my son. Not then, not when the alarm started screaming. Not when 3 cardiologists were arguing over his chart. Not even when I looked through the glass and saw a little boy with my eyes staring back at me. I was just a janitor. At least that's what everybody thought, including the woman standing beside his hospital bed. The woman I had loved more than anyone else on earth. The woman who had disappeared from my life 12 years earlier, Victoria Hayes, the billionaire CEO, the woman who was about to marry another man. And neither of us knew that within 72 hours, someone would try to murder her son. But before I tell you how that happened, you need to understand something about me, because nobody looks twice at a hospital janitor. People see the mop, they see the bucket, they see the faded uniform, and they decide they already know your whole story. What they don't see is what came before. What they don't see are the ghosts. 12 years earlier, my name had been on medical journals. I wasn't cleaning hospital floors. I was performing surgeries on them. I was one of the youngest cardiac surgeons in the state, 30 years old, top of my field, the kind of doctor people waited 6 months to see. And then I met Victoria. She wasn't a billionaire back then, not really. Her family was rich, very rich, but she was still trying to prove herself. We met at a charity fundraiser for pediatric heart patients. I was speaking. She was sponsoring. Neither of us wanted to be there, which is probably why we ended up talking for almost 4 hours. The first thing I noticed about Victoria wasn't her beauty, though she was beautiful. The first thing I noticed was that she listened, really listened. That was dangerous, because once someone makes you feel seen, it's hard to forget them. 3 months later, we were inseparable. 1 year later, I was shopping for engagement rings. 2 years later, everything exploded. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the hospital, back to the night my life crashed into hers again. I was cleaning the surgical wing when the emergency alarms started, the kind of alarms that make everyone move faster. Doctors started running. Nurses started shouting. A crash team raced past me. And in the middle of all that chaos, I heard a name, Noah Hayes. Something about that name made me look up. I followed them, not because I was supposed to, because I wasn't. Janitors don't belong in emergency cardiac cases, but something felt wrong. When I reached the observation window, I saw the boy, 10 years old, unconscious, pale, too pale. His heart rhythm was unstable, dangerously unstable. I looked at the monitor, then I looked at the medication chart, then I looked back at the monitor, and my stomach dropped, because the treatment they were preparing was wrong, not slightly wrong, fatally wrong. I knew that rhythm, I knew that pattern, and if they pushed that medication, the boy wasn't going to survive. A young doctor grabbed the syringe. I started walking. A nurse stepped in front of me. "Sir, you can't be here." I barely heard her. The doctor raised the medication. The monitor screamed. My pulse exploded, and before I even realized what I was doing, I pushed open the operating room door. Every head turned. The room went silent. A janitor had just interrupted a cardiac emergency. One of the surgeons swore at me. A nurse tried pulling me back. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the child, and something inside me, something I thought had died 12 years ago, came violently back to life. The surgeon lifted the syringe. I pointed at it and said 4 words that changed everything. "Don't give him that." Victoria stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. And honestly, I probably looked like one. 12 years can do that to a man, especially when those years are filled with loss. For a moment, nobody in the operating room moved. The surgeon holding the syringe looked furious. The nurses looked confused. The hospital administrator standing near the door looked ready to throw me out himself. But Victoria never took her eyes off me, neither did I. The last time we'd looked at each other like that, we were standing outside a courthouse. She was crying. I was begging her to believe me, and neither of us knew that our lives were about to be torn apart. Now here we were again, 12 years older, 1,000 regrets heavier, separated by an operating table and a dying child. The surgeon finally broke the silence. He demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I pointed at the monitor, then at the medication, then back at the boy. I explained that the rhythm wasn't responding the way they thought it was. The treatment protocol they were preparing was based on the assumption that Noah's condition was congenital, but it wasn't behaving like a congenital defect. Something else was happening, something they weren't seeing. The surgeon laughed, not because he found it funny, because people laugh when they feel challenged, especially by someone they think is beneath them. To him, I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't even a colleague. I was a janitor who cleaned the floors, a janitor who had no right to speak. Then Victoria asked a question, one simple question: can you save him? The room became silent again. I looked at Noah. The boy's skin was losing color, his pulse was fading, his heart was running out of time, and for reasons I couldn't explain, the thought of losing him hurt more than it should have, far more. I told her I could try. The surgeon immediately objected, the administrator objected, half the room objected, but Victoria didn't. She just kept staring at me. Then she signed the authorization form. Everything changed after that. I moved beside Noah's bed. For the first time in 12 years, my hands were shaking for the right reason, not because I was afraid, because I cared. I adjusted the medication, changed the dosage, modified the protocol, and waited 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The monitor suddenly flattened. A nurse gasped. Someone shouted. The surgeon swore under his breath, and Victoria nearly collapsed. For one horrifying moment, it looked like I had killed him. Then the rhythm returned. One beat, then another, stronger, steadier. The room froze. Noah's heart was recovering. The surgeon checked the monitor twice, then 3 times. He couldn't believe it. Neither could anyone else. The boy who was supposed to be crashing was stabilizing, and nobody could explain why except me. An hour later, Noah was alive. The immediate danger had passed. Victoria sat beside his bed. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. I was preparing to leave when a voice stopped me. Wait. It was Victoria, the first word she'd spoken directly to me in over a decade. I turned around. She stood slowly. Neither of us knew what to say. How do you speak to someone who once knew everything about you? How do you begin again after 12 years of silence? Finally, she asked the question, "What happened to you?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because there wasn't enough time in one night to answer it. What happened to me? I lost my career. I lost my reputation. I lost my future. I lost the woman I loved. I lost everything except the ability to keep breathing. But I didn't say any of that. I simply told her life had happened. The sadness in her eyes told me she understood. Then the door opened, and a man walked into the room, tall, expensive suit, perfect smile, the kind of smile that had never known a hungry day in its life. Adrian Blackwell. I recognized him immediately, not because we'd met, because I'd seen his face before, years ago, in a photograph attached to an old hospital board report. At the time, he'd been a young investor. Now he was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, and according to every magazine cover I'd seen recently, he was Victoria's fiancé. He crossed the room and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The gesture looked loving, protective, perfect, but something about it felt wrong, very wrong. His eyes moved from Victoria to Noah, then finally landed on me, and for just a fraction of a second, his smile disappeared, only for a moment, but I saw it. Recognition, not surprise, recognition, like he already knew exactly who I was, like he'd hoped never to see me again. Then the smile returned, and he introduced himself as though we'd never met. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because later that night, after everyone had gone home, I reviewed Noah's medical file again, and the more I studied it, the less sense it made. The diagnosis was wrong, the progression was wrong, the symptoms were wrong, everything about the case felt manufactured, almost as if someone wanted doctors to believe Noah had a heart condition, even though he didn't. Then I found something hidden inside the lab results, a tiny anomaly, small enough for most physicians to overlook, but not me. My blood ran cold, because I'd seen that pattern before, years ago, in a poisoning case. And suddenly one terrifying possibility entered my mind. Maybe Noah wasn't dying from disease. Maybe someone was slowly killing him. And if that was true, the most dangerous person in his life might not be a stranger. It might be someone sitting at his bedside every single day. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I sat in the hospital basement break room with Noah's chart spread across the table in front of me, drinking coffee so bad it tasted like punishment. Every janitor in that hospital knew the basement break room. No windows, one vending machine that stole money twice a week, a flickering light over the sink. It was the kind of room important people walked past without ever wondering who had to sit inside it. That was fine with me. I had spent 12 years becoming invisible. Invisible men hear things. They notice things. They survive by being underestimated. And that night, being underestimated may have been the only reason Noah was still alive. I studied his blood work again, then the medication history, then the admission notes from the last 9 months. The pattern was subtle, too subtle for a doctor moving quickly. Too subtle for a team already convinced they knew what disease they were treating. Noah would worsen at home, improve slightly in the hospital, then worsen again after returning home. His symptoms rose and fell like someone was controlling the tide. That was not how congenital heart failure moved. That was how exposure moved. Repeated exposure, small doses, spread out over time, clean enough to look natural, cruel enough to pass for tragedy. I closed the file and sat back. For several minutes I did nothing, because once a thought like that enters your mind, you have two choices. You either dismiss it because it is too horrible to carry, or you follow it and accept that the world may be uglier than you wanted to believe. I followed it. At 4 in the morning I found the first real clue. It was buried in a nursing note from 6 weeks earlier. A small line most people would have missed. Noah had reacted badly after taking his evening supplements from home, not hospital medication, home supplements. The next morning the symptoms were blamed on fatigue. Then it happened again, and again, different nurses, different wording, same pattern, home medication, evening dose, heart rhythm worsening within hours. I copied the notes by hand because I no longer trusted the hospital system. 12 years earlier, a medical file had destroyed my life. And files do not destroy lives by themselves. People do. I learned that lesson the hard way. I was still sitting there when Victoria found me. She entered the break room wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her hair was no longer perfect. Her eyes were red. Her face looked like it had finally run out of money, power, and control. For a moment, she did not look like Victoria Hayes, CEO of Hayes Global. She looked like the young woman I once loved, the one who used to fall asleep on my couch while I studied surgical journals at 2 in the morning, the one who believed I would become a great doctor before I believed it myself, the one who vanished from my life after the worst night I had ever lived. She looked at the files on the table, then at me. She wanted to know what I had found. I told her I had found a pattern, not proof yet, but enough to be afraid. I explained it carefully, without drama, because fear becomes useless when it moves too fast. I told her Noah's heart was not failing the way the hospital believed. I told her something outside his body might be pushing it into crisis. I told her the episodes seemed to follow his home medication schedule. I did not say poison immediately. Some words are too large to drop into a grieving mother's lap without warning, but Victoria understood before I finished. Mothers always do. Her face changed in a way I will never forget. Not panic, not denial, something worse. Recognition. Like 100 small moments from the last year suddenly rearranged themselves inside her mind and formed a picture she did not want to see. She remembered nights when Noah refused certain drinks, mornings when he said his vitamins made his chest feel strange, days when Adrian insisted the specialists knew best and that anxious mothers should not interfere with medical routines. She remembered Adrian standing beside the medicine cabinet, Adrian speaking with private nurses, Adrian replacing staff he said were careless, Adrian becoming indispensable. That is how predators work. They do not enter as monsters, they enter as solutions. By the time you suspect them, they already hold the keys. Victoria sat down across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said the thing I had been afraid to ask. She told me Noah was born 10 years and 3 months earlier. The room became very still. I looked at her. She looked away. 10 years and 3 months. I did the math once. Then again. There was no need to do it a third time. Noah was mine. The truth did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like a floor disappearing. For 12 years, I had believed Victoria left me because she stopped loving me. For 12 years, I had believed the life we might have had simply ended. Now I was sitting in a basement break room discovering that while I had been sweeping hospital floors, my son had been growing up in a mansion 3 neighborhoods away. I wanted to be angry, part of me was, but anger could not find a clean place to land. Victoria had been young, terrified, controlled by a father who measured people in bloodlines and bank accounts. I had been disgraced, unreachable, buried under headlines that called me reckless, negligent, dangerous. Both of us had been lied to. Both of us had been pushed apart. And Noah had paid the price. Victoria told me she found out about the pregnancy after she was taken overseas. Her father told her I had accepted money to leave. He showed her documents, signed statements, proof that looked official enough to break her heart. Later, when she came back to find me, my scandal had already exploded. My license was suspended. My name was poison. Every number she had for me was disconnected. Every letter came back unanswered. She thought I wanted nothing to do with her. I thought she had chosen her family over me. That is how lies win. They do not need to be perfect. They only need to arrive when people are too hurt to question them. I asked her why she never told Noah about me. She said she did not know how to tell a child his father had abandoned him when she was no longer sure she believed it herself. So she told him his father was gone. Not dead, not bad, just gone. That hurt, but not as much as what came next. She told me Noah had once asked whether gone people could still come back, and she had not known what to say. I stood up because sitting still had become impossible. I walked to the vending machine, then to the sink, then back to the table. I was a father, not someday, not maybe, not symbolically, a father, and my son was lying upstairs with poison moving through his body. There are moments in a man's life when grief, rage, love, and fear stop being separate things. They become one force, a force that either destroys him or gives him a reason to stand. For me, it did both. Victoria reached across the table but stopped before touching my hand. She did not ask forgiveness. Not yet. There was too much between us for a word that small. Instead, she asked what we had to do next. That was the right question. I told her we needed a clean toxicology panel done outside the hospital. No hospital lab, no Hayes family doctor, no private nurse connected to Adrian. I still had one person in the medical world who might answer my call, Dr. Mara Ellison. She had been a resident under me 12 years earlier. She was one of the few people who never believed I killed that patient. She now ran a small, independent lab 2 counties over. Calling her could expose everything, but not calling her could kill Noah. Victoria agreed before I finished explaining. By sunrise, we had a plan. She would request that Noah's home supplements be brought in under the excuse that the doctors needed a full list. I would collect a hair sample from his hospital pillow and a tiny clipping from his fingernail, enough to show long-term exposure if my suspicion was right. Mara would run the test off record, quietly, fast, and if we found what I feared. Then the man smiling beside Victoria's son was not a fiancé. He was a murderer practicing patience. The first problem was access. Adrian returned to the hospital at 8. He arrived with coffee for Victoria, flowers for the nurses, and concern polished so brightly it looked expensive. Everyone treated him like the perfect man. That was what made him dangerous. He remembered names, he thanked staff. He touched Victoria's shoulder gently. He asked about Noah in exactly the right tone. Not too emotional, not too cold, just enough. If I had not seen that flicker of recognition in his eyes the night before, I might have believed him too, but I had seen it. And once you see the crack in a mask, you cannot unsee it. Adrian noticed me near the hallway supply closet. He smiled like we were old friends. Then he asked why a janitor was still hanging around a restricted pediatric cardiac floor. He said it lightly, almost joking, but the security guard behind him heard it as an instruction. Within 10 minutes, the hospital administrator pulled me aside. He told me I was being reassigned away from the pediatric wing, effective immediately, for my own protection. That was the phrase he used. People love using protection as a cage. I asked who requested the reassignment. He said it was a hospital decision. He would not meet my eyes. That answered the question. Adrian had moved first. Victoria tried to fight it, but if she pushed too hard, Adrian would know she suspected him. So we let them think I was gone. Invisible men know service corridors. I knew every back hallway in St. Meridian, every stairwell, every staff elevator that stuck between floors, every door that looked locked but was not if you lifted the handle before pushing. By noon, I was back near Noah's room wearing a maintenance jacket instead of a janitor uniform. Victoria distracted Adrian by agreeing to meet with the board liaison he had been pressuring her to speak with. For 9 minutes, Noah's room had only one nurse nearby. Mara's kit was in my pocket. I collected what I needed with hands that wanted to shake but did not. A few strands from the pillow, a tiny nail clipping. A residue sample from the lip of a supplement bottle Victoria had placed inside a sealed bag. Noah stirred once while I was there. His eyes opened halfway. He looked at me, not with fear, with recognition. I do not know how much a child understands in moments like that. I only know that my son looked at me like some part of him had been waiting. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I wanted to tell him I had not known. I wanted to tell him that if the world gave me even one more day with him, I would spend it earning the name he had almost given me the night before. But he was too weak. So I only adjusted his blanket, and for the first time in my life I touched my son's hair, gently, as if the truth might break if I held it too hard. By 3 that afternoon, Mara called. She did not waste time with greetings. She said the hair sample showed repeated exposure to a rare cardiac glycoside compound, synthetic, difficult to detect in standard panels, dangerous in children, especially in small repeated doses. The supplement residue matched. Someone had been dosing Noah for months, maybe longer. The amount was too low to kill quickly. That was the point. It was designed to weaken him slowly, to create the appearance of an inherited heart condition, to make his death look like tragedy instead of murder. I listened without speaking. Victoria stood beside me in the service stairwell, watching my face collapse before she heard the words. When I told her, she bent forward like the air had been punched out of her. For a second, I thought she might fall. Then she straightened. Something had changed in her. Grief was still there, fear too, but behind both was a coldness I had not seen before. The kind of coldness a mother becomes when someone has been hurting her child. We still needed proof tying it to Adrian. Suspicion would not be enough. A lab result could be challenged. The sample chain could be attacked. My past would be used against me. Adrian would paint me as a disgraced doctor obsessed with an old lover and desperate to reclaim a life that no longer belonged to him. And the worst part was, he would sound believable. That was when Victoria told me about the trust. Noah held a protected inheritance stake in Hayes Global from his grandfather. As long as Noah lived, Victoria remained the primary guardian of those shares. But if Noah died before turning 18, and if Victoria remarried, her spouse could become co-trustee over the reverted family holdings. I remember standing in that stairwell, hearing those words and feeling the last piece click into place. Noah was not just a child to Adrian. He was an obstacle, a legal obstacle, a financial obstacle, a living piece of paper standing between Adrian Blackwell and billions. That was when I realized we were not dealing with a man who had lost control. We were dealing with a man who had planned years ahead, and if he had planned this carefully for Noah, then maybe he had planned 12 years earlier too. The thought came before I could stop it. My license, my destroyed career, the patient who died on my table, the missing medication logs, the altered records, the bored investor whose name I had seen once in a file I was never supposed to read, Adrian Blackwell. Victoria saw the change in my face. She asked what it was. I told her I thought Noah might not have been Adrian's first victim, and before I could explain, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a single message, no words, just a photograph. Lily, my daughter, standing outside her school, taken that afternoon from across the street. Underneath the photo was one sentence: stay away from the boy. When the code amber announcement echoed through the hospital, everything inside me went cold. For 1 second I thought I had misunderstood. Then I looked at the bed. The boy I had just revived was not Noah. Same age, same size, same blanket, but not my son. Adrian had not tried to kill Noah in that room. He had used another emergency to empty the hallway. While every doctor, nurse, and guard ran toward the alarm, someone had taken Noah out of the hospital. Victoria reached the doorway a few seconds later. I had never seen her like that, not frightened, destroyed. A mother can survive fear, but the sight of an empty bed where her child should be does something worse than frighten her. It removes the world beneath her feet. Adrian was already gone. That told me where to begin. Men like him do not run without a destination. They run toward the place they prepared. I grabbed the hospital security tablet from the nurse's station and searched the deleted hallway feed. Most of it was gone, but not all of it. One reflection survived in the glass of a vending machine. A service elevator, a man in a gray medical coat, a child in a wheelchair, and behind them, just for half a second, the black edge of Adrian's coat. Victoria saw it too. She stopped crying. That was the moment the CEO came back. But this time the CEO was not fighting for a company. She was fighting for her son. She remembered a lake house her family owned outside the city. Adrian had suggested moving Noah there after discharge, calling it a peaceful place to recover. At the time, she thought it was tenderness. Now we understood it was preparation. We left before the police could stop us. Victoria drove like a woman with nothing left to lose. I sat beside her with one hand pressed against the dashboard and the other gripping my phone, listening to Marcus track the private road cameras. 20 minutes later, he confirmed a black SUV had passed the north gate toward the lake. No police escort, no ambulance, no medical transport, just Adrian and Noah. The lake house was dark when we arrived, too dark. No porch light, no security lamps, only the weak glow of a room near the back. Victoria wanted to run straight in. I stopped her. That may have been the hardest thing I did all night, because I wanted to run too. But fathers who rush blindly sometimes leave their children with no one left to save them. We entered through the boathouse. I found Noah in the back room, lying on a sofa, pale and sweating, with an oxygen tube taped badly beneath his nose. He was conscious enough to see me, not enough to speak, but his hand moved, just a little, toward me. That almost broke me. Adrian stepped out from the hallway before I reached him. No performance now, no perfect fiancé, no grieving guardian. Just a man angry that the janitor he had buried 12 years earlier had crawled back into the story. He told Victoria this could still end quietly. He claimed Noah was dying anyway. He said the company needed stability. He said she could sign the emergency trust transfer that night, announce Noah's tragic decline in the morning, and let him protect everything her father built. That was when Victoria finally understood. Adrian had never loved her. He had loved the door she opened. Noah was the lock, and I was the mistake he had failed to erase. I moved toward my son. Adrian warned me not to. I kept moving. Then Noah's monitor began to fall. The poison had reached another crisis point. There was no operating room, no crash team, no clean equipment. Only a medical bag Adrian had brought to keep the lie believable. And me, a man the world still called a disgraced doctor. I worked on the floor of that lake house with Victoria holding the flashlight, crying without making a sound. I used what little medicine was there. I changed the oxygen line. I forced Noah's heart through the worst of it, one breath at a time. Adrian tried to leave during the chaos. He almost made it to the door. Then Marcus arrived with the police. But the arrest did not happen because of me. It happened because of Noah. Earlier that day, before everything collapsed, I had placed a small voice recorder inside the pocket of Noah's hospital hoodie. I told him it was only so he could record symptoms when words were hard. I never imagined it would record Adrian's confession, but it had. Every word, the trust, the poison, the plan to make Noah's death look natural, even the truth about my old case. Adrian had altered the hospital file 12 years earlier because I was the only man Victoria had ever chosen without permission. He destroyed me first, then waited for her life to become lonely enough to enter. When the recording played in that room, Adrian stopped denying, not because he felt guilt, because he knew the performance was over. Noah survived the night. Barely. The next weeks were not beautiful. They were hospital rooms, court statements, blood tests, lawyers, headlines, and a little boy learning that the man who saved him was also the father he had never been allowed to know. My medical license was restored after the old case was reopened. Victoria publicly broke her engagement and removed every person Adrian had placed inside Hayes Global. But none of that was the real ending. The real ending came almost a year later. No cameras, no boardroom, no gala, just a small ceremony at the Children's Heart Clinic I opened with Victoria's help. Noah stood beside me that day, healthy enough to run, stubborn enough to argue, and brave enough to speak into a microphone. He told the room that people had called me a janitor, a failure, and a danger. Then he said I was none of those things. I was his father. Victoria cried when he said it. So did I, not loudly, but enough that Noah noticed. After the ceremony, he took my hand and then took his mother's. He looked at both of us and said the thing that finally gave back everything 12 years of lies had taken. He said he did not want a perfect family. He just wanted the one that had kept coming back for him. Victoria and I married the following spring. Small, quiet, no billionaires watching, no reporters, just Noah, Lily, a few friends, and the people who had stayed when the story stopped being pretty. People later said I got my life back, but that is not true. The life I lost was gone. What I got was something different. a son I never knew I had, a daughter who forgave me for being afraid, a woman I had loved once and learned to love again, and the truth that no man, no matter how rich or careful, can bury forever, because sooner or later the heart tells on him.